Good afternoon. I'm Alice Menaker from the Blismax Gallery, and I'm part of the threesome that is putting the DimeStories together. Jane Macdonald, who will be the moderator today, and Nora Lynn Beavers, who unfortunately is sick, so she's not going to be joining us today. But she has done so much work to get all these great writers together, and she'll be watching our film later on when it gets published through the library. Oh, we're getting more chairs. That's great. I'm going to just hand it right over to Jane, first also saying a big thank you to the library for having us here today. And Jane, take it over.
Hi, everybody. So I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping before I forget. Did you turn off your phone, my friend? Also, bathrooms are next floor up. There is a stairway, and there is Alice is, oh gosh, I'm wrong. There's one here. Open your eyes, friend. So there are bathrooms here, also on the next floor up. I think that's it. We are recording this. Adam Kavanaugh is our wonderful partner at the library here, and Adam is recording. So if you do not want to have your image on the video, please let me or Alice know, and we do have the means of pixelating your image. And we have received an okay from all of our readers. And last year's video that Adam did for us is up on YouTube, on the library's YouTube channel. Okay, so that's the housekeeping part. I want to reiterate our sincere thanks for the library. Yay, the library, for everything, right? Truly a force of good and of democracy. Thank you, libraries everywhere, and ours. Secondly, we are gathered here today, great. And it's important that we're here. We get to be together, and we're going to tell stories to each other and listen to stories. And so I want to take this opportunity to remind us that we are treaty people, and we have a relationship, and that has long been neglected. So I just really encourage all of us to, what way can we be a treaty person and bring that forward? There's so much promise, so much promise. Oh, right. Now, I promised Nora Lynn, our colleague, the third in the triumvirate, can you say that? Bringing this on. So I said, Nora Lynn, we're totally bummed you can't be here, but your name will be in this room. So on the count of 1, 2, 3, please all of us, let's say Nora Lynn. 1, 2, 3. Nora Lynn! Yay, thank you, Nora Lynn. Okay, now, to get on with today's proceedings, DimeStories. So this is the brainchild of Alice. In her wanderings in San Diego, she saw a DimeStories format and really loved the storytelling. So we are doing it here. The whole idea is that there's no palaver in between all of the readers. There's no, like, this is my 5th book and it's been, we're not doing that. We're just coming up and we're telling a story. We're leaving the airwaves open for story. So consequently, the program is important. So please take a look at your program. It'll tell you more about your reader and where they are to be found. With the exception of we have 3 open mics spots. So they're a last-minute entry to today. So I'll be introducing them by name. Excuse me, when they come. Although that guy Ian I was looking for, bless his heart, he's not here. So That's our third open mic. All right. So I'm going to dip in quickly, speaking about where we come from and what keeps us here. This one is called The Quick and Alive. This is me reading now. Okay, now I'm a writer. Okay. The Quick and Alive. For example, at the corner, waiting for her friend, she swings her leg out and around, twists like red licorice. Or my gray cat, licking her belly, moves on to her extended front leg, stops, considers, resumes. I think she's comfortable in my house, meaning she has a purpose, meaning what is my purpose? Cars roll and slow, stop to let their public schoolers out, watch them onto the playground and through the faux oak doors. Patch by patch, lot by lot, county, highway, city grid, the parabola of our precise location. Wisdom takes the long view, says, you tried your best. Compassion is the mouse in the basement, chewing at the bag of cat food, pink velvet ears relaxed in the dark, needle claws quick as a millipede, foot thud on the floorboards, she freezes, and paws, jaws, black eyes, tail, listens. Please welcome Jill Hill.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be back here. Can you hear me? Is that good? Okay. My piece is called All Dressed Up and Somewhere to Go. If I were looking for a memoir topic, I doubt I would immediately think, oh, I'll just look in my closet. But a prompt had come from my writing colleague, Deb Whittall. Write about some task or project from your childhood and tell how it turned out. Coincidentally, I had already assigned myself a task for right now. Go through my crowded closet and handle and try on every single item. And if it did not fit or was too worn out or I simply did not like it anymore, it was to be dealt with. Memo to self, if you won't wear it, nobody else will. This project coincided with a period I have labeled with Trumpian excess the longest 3 months in Canadian history. Well, okay, the longest 3 months in our family's history. My husband's broken neck had him incarcerated, his word, in the convalescent ward of the excellent Lennox and Addington Hospital. Every day I traveled north, mostly on the beautiful rural back roads, to deliver newspapers and magazines, local gossip, and any funny stories I could scrape up to amuse and divert him. And for a humorous challenge, I decided to wear a different outfit every single day. I don't know what the staff at the visitor sign-in booth thought. What's this little old lady coming in sporting all these outrageous get-ups? Hats, shawls, dangly earrings, odd combinations of colors, styles, tight pants, bloomer pants, short jackets, long jackets. I at least was amused, and so fortunately was the bored, pent-up patient. His questions poured out. Where did you get that? Have I seen that before? When did you wear that? And fairly often he claimed it was the first time he had ever clapped eyes on it. Eyes, eh? We have always acknowledged that almost every piece of the rather large collection of artworks and artisania we've acquired over the years, and that we continue to love, comes with a story. The pieces and their provenance often resonate with their creators, country we happen to be living in at the time, the people we met, the friends we made, the adventures of a long life. It had never occurred to me that my wardrobe might hold the same tales. But there were the ponchos from Mexico and Guatemala, 1970s, the tunic, fabric bought in Thailand in 1974, but not made up until India, 1995. The wraparound skirt, made apparently when I was several inches taller, from Cuba in 1972. The unusual jacket from the late lamented Sarah Close in Ottawa, where I worked down the street at a bookshop in 1980. And that perpetually crumpled linen shirt from Chicago's Miracle Mile in 1999. There are items purchased, often in a panicky haste for weddings and other special occasions, which fortunately, considering their cost, turned out to be good value, and parts of them still wearable. I wish I could tell you that the Clearing Out the Closet project was a roaring success, now with healthy gaps and breathing space, both for me and the clothes, that the donation bag is full, as is the green garbage bag. But no, my story bag has more in it than the discard container. The oldest usable item that came to light was a shawl, 1967. My husband John had joined the Department of Trade and Commerce in 1966, and he had just received his first posting, Second Secretary Commercial at the Canadian Embassy in Copenhagen, Denmark. My authoritative sister-in-law, also a diplomatic spouse, took me aside to instruct me that I was to proceed immediately to buy a little black dress. It was to be tailored and simple, not racy in any way, and definitely not flashy. This would be essential for cocktail parties and useful for funerals. I had not imagined that funerals would be a crucial part of the social activities for unpaid Canadian emissaries. It seems that diplomats from other countries had a habit of popping off at short notice. Obediently, I got myself to the shop my relative had suggested, and with the help of a salesperson, found what seemed to be a suitable but unremarkable frock. As I was getting out my checkbook to pay for it, my eye landed on a silk befringed shawl draped over a chair across the room. Not risque, but definitely flashy. It would certainly tart up the plain LBD. What the heck, I said, I'm having it. In my bedroom, I am trying on all the clothes that I have decided to keep. I fling the shawl over my shoulder. In the full-length mirror, just for a second, I catch a glimpse of her, the young woman about to set out on a new adventure. Nearly 60 years ago, there was a girl who was ready to flout the rules and flaunt a shawl.
Thank you, Jill. All right, next, Plum Johnson, please. Please welcome Plum.
Thank you so much. Every summer, we made a lengthy pilgrimage to visit our cousins in Virginia. 7 of us were crammed into Dad's red Pontiac station wagon, our luggage strapped to the roof rack. It took 2 days driving south on Route 15 in humid 90-degree heat. There was no air conditioning, so all the windows were rolled down wide. Sandy, Robin, Victor, and I were squished in the middle row, while Chris lay in the back, hemmed in on all sides by a jumble of toys, overnight bags, and our wicker picnic hamper. In the front seat, Dad was coiled up tight around the steering wheel, trying to listen to classical music on the radio. Mum had been nagging him for miles to stop so the boys could pee beside the road, but Dad would only stop for gas. "Alec, pull over," she said. but Dad wouldn't stop. I said stop, she shouted, but Dad only stepped on the accelerator. It was embarrassing to be in the same car with a bunch of little brothers clutching their legs, squirming and whimpering, so I hung out the window trying to act aloof and sophisticated. I was wearing a white sleeveless blouse and my brand new Bermuda shorts that Mum let me order from the Sears catalog. So I just smoothed my ponytail and let the wind cool my neck, pretending to be somewhere else. I don't know why you have to be so mean, Mum said to Dad, as she leaned over and punched in the cigarette lighter. She lit her cigarette and exhaled out the window, her elbow resting on the window ledge, and her red fingernails tapping the door frame. Suddenly, her left hand shot over and twisted the radio knob to a news station. She cranked the volume up high. Dad slapped her hand and switched the dial back to his classical music. Mum glared at Dad. His eyes flickered to me in the rearview mirror. "Plum," he shouted. "Who is this composer? Quick!" I had no idea who the composer was. "Who is this composer?" Dad repeated. "Answer me." Frantically, I searched the sky, praying for the universe to deliver me an answer. Disappointing Dad seemed to be the only thing I was good at. Dad turned to Mum. "We give her a perfectly good education and she can't even name this composer?" "Bach," I said quietly. The name just popped into my head. "Bach," Dad snorted. "Of course it's not Bach. Stupid answer." Just then the music ended and the composer said, "You have been listening to Little Prelude in C major by Johann Sebastian Bach." "Good girl." Mom turned around to smile at me, looking astonished. "See," she said to Dad, "you owe Plum an apology." Dad switched off the radio. "Apologize to Plum." Dad didn't say a word, but I was electrified, as if my skull had split open. Obviously, all the answers to all the questions in the universe were just floating around in the ether, and all you needed to do was open your mind and let one pop in. There must be millions of ideas, brilliant ideas, just floating around looking for an open mind. This was the great secret. People didn't get ideas. Ideas got people, and I needed to be ready. It wasn't the first time I'd stumbled on one of the great secrets. 5 years earlier, in grade 1, I'd discovered the blue moon trick to make myself invisible. Whenever Mrs. Williamson was about to ask the class a question and walk down the aisle trying to decide who to pick on, I discovered that if I concentrated on the words, "blue moon, blue moon, blue moon," she didn't choose me. Then I discovered it worked at home, too. Whenever I played hide and seek in the garden with Dad, the same thing happened. He'd be inches from my hiding place, could probably even hear me breathe. But if I latched onto the words in my mind and focused hard, blue moon, blue moon, blue moon, the words seemed to suck me through a black hole into an alternate universe, and Dad walked right on by. It meant that the power of my mind could put a fence around me, block my energy, make me invisible. And most of the time, that's exactly what I wanted. I now had proof that anything was possible, even things not yet imagined, especially things not yet imagined. And this knowledge was as transformative as it was mysterious. Ideas were the property of the universe. We were just receivers if we wanted to be, and I did.
Thank you, Plum. So we had a bit of a change in our order. So Andrea very kindly agreed to switch with Plum. Okay. Did you need to slip out? Will I give you this unobtrusive moment to sleep out?
I apologize. The rain is predicted and we need to drive to Toronto, and so I hate to leave, but I want to be back to your next one.
Please come again, Plum. To Toronto you go. Good trip, friend. Thank you for coming. All right, next I would like to please welcome Jenny Stewart.
is called Restraint. On day 15, I enter the level 3 intensive care unit, the same way I've entered it for the last 14 days. My shoulders relax slightly. There's no one else in the reception area. It's just me and the guardian. This one recognizes me. She speaks into a phone, looks at me, and says, "You can go in, Mrs. H." By now I know the path to my husband's room intimately. The long, wide corridors, the spotlessly clean gray linoleum floor, the pale blue walls covered with things I can't identify, the rooms containing other patients, their inert bodies sometimes shockingly visible to passers-by. The noises are less strange now, too. Beeping sounds, whooshing sounds, rapid footsteps, voices speaking urgently, but never loudly. As I put one foot in front of the other, my mind focuses on the lists that are always front and center. One is for the things that are now routine, like fused vertebrae, blood clots, med cocktails, and SAT levels. The other is for things to be avoided at all costs, like too much time on the ventilator and deadly pressure sores that won't heal. My husband is counting on me to understand what's happening to him while he's on life support. This is the place where I realized how mind-numbing it is to have to tolerate unintentional insensitivity. Like how on day 3, when Nurse David was swapping out one of my husband's IV bags and casually remarked that I would be amazed at how many newly retired people have awful accidents. Or how on day 7, when I was first invited to listen in on the team's rounds, and they tossed out the word paraplegic as casually as if they'd been discussing lunch options. This past week's particular nightmare started on day 10, when the team lead said to me, "We're going to try and take him off the vent today, see how he does, breathing on his own." Of course, it didn't happen that first day, and it didn't happen the next day, or the one after that. When this promise, because that's what it felt like to me, wasn't kept, that's when thoughts of my husband becoming neurologically impaired, or worse still, leaving me forever, began to embed themselves into my mind. Those were the days that saw me walking the long ICU hallways, hugging the right wall, with my eyes forward, my head down. For 4 excruciating days, I pleaded to a God I hadn't spoken to in decades, begging for something I needed that no one could promise me. Arriving at the command station outside my husband's room on day 15, I see that today's nurse is Diana. She greets me and says matter-of-factly, "He's breathing on his own right now." I take a step backwards, feel my heart thump erratically as my stomach lurches. My hands tremble and my teeth want to chatter. I strain to see past the nurse and into my husband's room. He'd been conscious off and on this past week. He'd waggled his eyebrows at me to say hello. I'd talked to him, soothed his forehead with damp claws, held his hands, even when they were in restraints, especially when they were in restraints. I'd told him repeatedly in the 14 days leading up to this one, even though he wasn't conscious most of the time, that when they finally take the breathing tube out, his first word needs to be, "Fuck!" I wanted him to say this, not only because my husband never swears, and if there's ever to be a first time, this is surely it, but also because this is the word my entire body has been screaming since the day he fell off our deck and broke his back. On day 15, I see my husband's face for the first time without a hose reaching from a ventilator to his mouth and down his throat. The plastic wedge that kept his teeth separated has left a deep indent on his bottom lip. Nurse Diana watches me watching him. She quietly tells me that somehow he broke out of his restraints in the middle of the night and yanked the tube out himself. I am so very proud of him. I now see 15 days of reddish blonde facial hair curling around his dry, chapped lips. He has a mustache, something he hasn't had in nearly 20 years. His eyes are closed, his face relaxed. I've watched this face for 37 years. Today it reminds me of the 22-year-old I fell in love with, beautiful and full of hope. He opens his eyes, sees me, and whispers hoarsely, "Oh, you're here." Thank you.
Jenny, thank you.
Just make sure they're using the microphone. Okay. I gotta make sure they're using the microphone.
Okay, and now for our first open mic reader, please, Heather Lindsay.
I have 3 poems for you. One is a part of a plein air poetry practice. The other one is more of an indoor affair. And the other one's just there. A wander in the woods. In the forest, so much seems like a remnant of life before this moment. Some trees fallen for over a century, some only decades, maybe some from just yesterday. Branches lay everywhere, offer stories only the forest knows. The floor, so soft and receptive, hears everything. In places, it's like a sponge bed. The scent of sap ascends with each footstep. Paper birch pieces lay in wait of a poem. An abandoned woodlot, a timber dream. The glow of moss comforts ancient stone faces, shadows of history, yours and mine. How we are drawn to places like this that help us understand how nature is the bedrock of our being. It seems our voices that most need to be heard emerge on a walk like this. Going deep into the woods is going deep into yourself. There's a place there for breathing that happens nowhere else. I listen well because this is my truest moment. There are stories I need to share, stories I need to tell others who haven't walked where I've walked, who haven't felt the calm or known they've needed the balm that only comes from making friends with the trunk of a cedar, or the bark of a spruce, or the cones of a pine, or the bronze feathers of a dried fern. This is a language all its own, a vocabulary that helps me attune to what's trying to speak through me in this liminal moment. In the forest, I can hear my interior landscape. It feels like these copper-colored pine needles are laid out like a red carpet, waiting just for me to listen to the vastness of my quiet inner realm. This one is called Daily Devotions. When I open my eyes, she is sitting right beside me. Her curious, crumpled forehead, coffee-colored eyes stare as if inspecting every inch of my face, urging me to wake up. Her black chin rests on my white sheets like she's waiting to receive communion. I am the host. This is the christening of a new day. She blesses our mornings with her devotion to our shared existence by greeting the change in my breathing from asleep to awake as if something is being born anew. The dove of her tender attention circles our cloistered bedroom. Her tail thumps gently like the metronome of her heart on the wide plank pine floor. Her chocolate eyes melt any concerns I might wake with before morning blossoms inside me with only the focus of her pitch muzzle and intense affections warming me like my feather duvet. And to think I say I am not religious, while this daily prayer ritual calls forth in me a place in my soul I am grateful to call home. And this is called The Ecstasy of Enough. My paradise is wanting nothing more than what I have, knowing I'm growing into the person I am meant to be. My paradise is a deep sense of ease and trust in all I cannot see, a mystic's touch to pen my words with poems to fill my page. My paradise is to welcome everything, to age with grace, no mistakes to blame or take away the suffering in loving, to value every part of each moment, no matter how bleak the detritus of wasted days on that which never came to be. My paradise holds loss and gain, the way a garden drinks the drench of rain deep into the rooted soil of its dreams. My paradise accepts me as I am, even if I fall apart, even if I crawl to start, my hope will never end. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Now, I didn't greet Sarah. Is Sarah here, Moran? Oh, there you are, Sarah. You're next, please, my friend. Thank you. Please, please welcome Sarah Moran.
Am I right in the microphone?
Yeah. No, up.
No? Up? Up? Ooh. Not shrinking too much yet then. This story is in a book of stories. My story's in this book of stories, which is collected from people local to the county. This is the book, which is launched today in Wellington Library.
When is it launched, Sarah?
Today, Wellington Library. And tomorrow, Ameliasburg Museum, the Methodist Church. My official status when I arrived in Toronto, stamped on papers, was landed immigrant. I didn't feel landed, more like unlanded, uprooted and far from home. In time, with my husband, I moved to South Bay, here in the county, to an unrestored farm that had been built early in the 19th century by the Wellbanks family. Like us, they had come from England. We set about making new gardens and separated them from the barnyard with the 19th century cedar rail fencing, which had been discarded all around the farm. When I dug the spade into the soil for the first time, I suddenly felt a presence behind me. Looking around, I saw no one there. That presence, though, stayed with me, light and happy. Over time, it seemed I could hear it following me around in the garden, with small steps, 3 steps to one of mine, and making a sound of starched cotton rustling around its feet, like long petticoats or pantaloons. Into my mind crept the certainty that this was a little Victorian girl. She made me glad, there to keep me company. Well, who is she? My husband asked. I paused to wonder. He proposed we uncover her name, divining it with a pendulum and the letters of the alphabet written across a strip of paper. Swinging the pendulum over each letter, he asked it to indicate if the letter was in her name. It first indicated H, then, swinging over the alphabet again, E, then I. T. T again, then I, and finally E. Hetty. That was the name of my new friend. And she stayed all the time I was digging the gardens until we finished. And then she never returned. Locals often drop by to size up the new people at the Wellbanks farm. And one day, 2 guys stopped and sat on the porch for a chat.
They told us that when they were kids in the 1960s, they often visited an ancient relative at the farm, encouraged because she baked them cookies. And she'd been born in the farm in the late 1800s and lived there all her life until she died. We asked them if maybe she was the last Wellbanks family there, Stella Wellbanks. They said they couldn't be sure and explained, we only knew her as Hetty.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, Paulette Rothbauer, please welcome her.
You got it? Good. Is that okay? As I observe my mom, I hold the blue and green hardcover book, How to Survive the Loss of a Love. I gave this self-help book to her 25 years or so ago in the weeks after her father died, an ocean away in Holland. We hadn't yet learned how to talk about hard things, and even though we aren't a family that exchanges books like this, she keeps it on her small bookshelf beside a printed hardbound copy of my thesis. I'm remembering the time she said it helped her, and how the look on her face was one of being recognized. Now she has turned away from me, lying on the pull-out couch in the spare room. She shifts her weight across her hips, faces the wall, eyes screwed shut, duvet pulled up to her ears, refusing all food but so thirsty. Her dry lips pull at the plastic bottle of flavored water. There's not much to her. Another fact, her very short, very white hair is standing on end. She looks like a shocked cat, like a fluffy baby bird. There's no point in similes, finding metaphor, nor any kind of poetry. It's better to be plain spoken when it comes to my mom. But it is hard to follow her hallucinatory cantering. It's like hearing a new song. You don't quite know the melody, but still you anticipate how the lyrics will go. I listen hard with a kind of breathless openness. This helps me with the strangeness of these stories, with the peripheral people from the past now taking center stage. Today it's Doug, the assistant prosthetician who made her first artificial leg. I notice that my hand is almost always pressing against my heart as I listen and try to understand. Imagine going to sleep and waking up with one leg amputated below the knee. An emergency. Of course there was consent, but also a collective and rigid disavowal of loss. Because in a twist that I do not make up, my dad also has an artificial leg since childhood. He ran away to join the circus, lost his grip on the truck he'd flung himself on, falling, his left leg slipping under the rear wheel. Of course, there's more to this story, but when it came time for my mom's amputation, we could be cheerful because we knew it was no tragedy. There is a rising elegy that should have been part of my mom's prognosis. The right leg from just below the knee, the foot, the toes, the painted toenails, balance, mobility, autonomy, self-reliance, privacy, gone. And then there are the encumbrances, the wheelchair, the walker, the canes, the series of fiberglass limbs, the silk and wool stump socks, the black orthopedic shoes. After all this, eventually, her bewilderment and impatience, her fury, I know implacable. When I sit beside her on the couch, she frequently tears the leg off, rolls the socks down over her thigh, and thrusts her knee towards my face. She impatiently slaps the impossibly soft lump of flesh that hangs there. See? See?
I do not know what I am meant to see when she does this. I gently put my hands on what's left of her leg, calmly pull the socks back up, smooth up the rubber sleeve, slide the leg over her knee, and tighten the Velcro straps. I know in co-ed. And my question now that my mom is gone is, how did I not know that I would want that book? Not as a manual for grief, but how to read myself back to her.
Thank you, Paulette. Now, please welcome Andrea Lacson.
Hello, is this a good?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is from a short story that I've written, just an excerpt. She was 21 when she left home. She flew from Manila to Hong Kong to Toronto. It was 1981. She left because she wanted to live, but not because she wanted to leave home. She left because she was tired of the constraints of poverty and of the difficulties of life in a country where nothing was easy. The first day that she arrived in Canada, one of the things she spent her money on was a trip to the top of the CN Tower. Staggered, she realized that she was standing the highest a human had ever stood, buoyed by the possibility of human life. She'd asked a stranger to take a picture of her, her heart searing with pride as she enclosed the photograph inside a letter to her mother. Her leaning against a metal guardrail, the broad skyline stretching out behind her. She'd been hired by an agency as a live-in nanny. Hers was a family of 4 living in Forest Hill. The father was a lawyer from a family of lawyers, and the mother was a former actress. Their house was wide and spacious, tall brick walls surrounded by a thick metal fence and pruned hedges. Inside, light glinted off of each surface. Each child's closet was bigger than her own room. During the first week, she'd made the mistake of entering the mother's office, not realizing it was a private space. When she entered, the mother shrieked at her, telling her to get out. When she got back to her room, she sat on her bed, hands quivering with fear. It had been a mistake, she thought. She wouldn't get fired for a mistake. The next morning, the mother's eyes stood empty and ambivalent. "Could you pass me the salt?" she asked, pointing impatiently across the table, the incident forgotten in her mind. It was good to have this reminder, she thought to herself. None of this was hers. Though this was where she lived, this was not her home. Nothing belonged to her. Not the cutlery that she used to eat, the bed she laid on, or the toilet she defecated in. The only thing that was hers in that home was the things that she had brought with her. Even her own body and will belonged to the family that employed her. Being a nanny wasn't her dream, of course, but it was what allowed her to live. Her actual dream had appeared so easily, forming when she was only a small child. She'd won a singing competition, unable to forget how it felt on stage. Her beneath the lights, a collective breath held, a poignant quiver in her voice, then a deep release from her chest. The crowd silent, then bursting into applause. But the joy that singing brought her was not something she could survive on. How could she dream of singing when her sisters couldn't afford to go to school, when her mother couldn't pay for her own medication? Thankfully, she loved the 3 children she cared for. This made life easier to live. All willful and needy like most children, they kept her busy. The years passed quickly because of them. Though she cared for them all, she did have a favorite. The youngest boy, willful and impulsive, but sweet. When she first arrived to the home, he was only a year old. Even though she knew he wasn't her child, he felt like her own. How could he not? She had changed all of his diapers and taught him how to walk. She applauded proudly at his school recitals, sang him to sleep, and fetched him hot lemon water when he was sick. On the night before his 6th birthday, the youngest boy woke in the dead of the night, crying because of a nightmare. He ran to her room, pushing open her bedroom door, leaving it ajar. The boy climbed into her bed, insisting that she rub his back while he lay by her side. Together, they fell asleep, him on top of her sheets and her underneath. The next morning, he was gone. Before she could leave her room, the mother appeared in her doorway, handing her a letter. "Your contract has been terminated due to inappropriate behavior," the paper read. The words danced in front of her eyes, filling with tears. If she couldn't survive here, she'd die, she thought, falling to her knees.
Thank you, Andrea. Now, please welcome Ele Pawelski.
Is this good? Okay, terrific. Hi everyone, I'm Elle. My story is called The Hitchhiker and the Driver. When I wrote this, I never anticipated that I would read it, so of course the two main characters are men. I'm going to try my best with some voices here. Wish me luck. Hollow headlights cut across the hitchhiker's torso. He blinked in the glare, his eyes having become accustomed to the evening gloom. Quickly, he put out his right thumb and threw a smile on his face. He'd been angling for a lift for ages. The last 3 cars had hurled by, adding to the layer of dust he was already wearing. Underfoot, shriveled leaves crunched beneath his soles. He'd been walking both to kill time and feel like he was getting somewhere. He also thought drivers preferred to pick up walkers than standers. But he was tired of the endurance contest. The pick-me-up of the coffee, purchased at the gas station, had long worn off. His boots were weights on his feet. He willed the car to stop. His power of suggestion worked as the right turn signal flicked on. Roadside gravel sprayed from the tires. He welcomed the pelleting, eagerly clutched the Cadillac's door handle and poked his head around the frame. The driver shoved his comb-over back in place as he leaned over the passenger seat. "Howdy, get on in." His tone was pleasant, engaging even, someone who sought company. His parted lips showed teeth jumbled together. Parents either had no money or no interest in braces when he was small. He had on a red lumber jacket, the kind everyone wore in the 80s, and now looked retro or outdated, depending on the wearer. In this case, outdated. "Thanks. It's been a long while since I was dropped off. Sure grateful you pulled over." The hitchhiker dropped his eyes to the remains of lunch, or more likely dinner on the passenger seat. The driver, too, looked down. Abruptly, he tossed the cardboard box, napkins, and drink cup to the floor behind. He swiped a hand down the middle of the vinyl. Sorry, I try not to be messy, but it doesn't always work." A muted laugh. "I travel a lot, seem to live out in my car sometimes, but I have everything I need right here." The hitchhiker tried to see into the back, the growing garbage dump. Dimness made it difficult. Plus, he didn't want to appear to be peeping. Every man has a right to his space. The Cadillac, like the driver, was old. Only 2 doors, big trunk. Inside leached old sweat and food grease. A couple of fries sagged over the console. The driver noticed at the same time as him. Speedily, the driver scooped them into his mouth. Better than throwing them in the back, the hitchhiker supposed. He climbed into the now empty front space. With a jolt, The car veered back onto the road. It can get fiercely quiet when you're on the back roads. I drive the back roads a lot, much better than the busy highways. You never know if you'll find somebody looking for a lift. The driver gave the hitchhiker a stare, then grinned. Whenever I see someone, I always pick them up. After all, they're trying to get somewhere, and why shouldn't I help? Unless there's more than one, then I don't always stop. I can't vouch for the back seat. Don't really want anyone sitting back there. I remember once I picked up a young fellow, much like yourself, and he tried to tell me he saw a rat back there. Now, I don't drive around with rats in my car, I told him. Who would have rats in their car? With a sideways glance, the driver jutted his chin out at the hitchhiker. I don't know. No one, I guess. Exactly. I didn't like that kind of accusation, especially because he was my guest in my car. That's what I told him. The hitchhiker gazed out the window. There were no streetlights, the stars weren't very bright, and the moon was AWOL. The road was one lane in either direction. Far off on each side were ghostly outlines of pine trees. Occasionally, there was an opening with a house or a barn tucked in, but very occasionally. It was the middle of nowhere. No one knew where they were, but the two of them. The hitchhiker strained his ears, listening for squeaky noises in the back. Where are you headed? North. North? North. Can't say I've picked up anyone going north. Figured you'd be going west. Everybody goes west. I'm not everybody. You realize this highway runs east-west. Sure, I know that, the hitchhiker drawled, sucking in his teeth. He knew the roads in this area, sometimes better than the drivers who picked him up. The hitchhiker hunched into his seat. The belt pinning him in was biting into his shoulder. He shifted to relieve the pressure. When you're hitchhiking, you don't usually get where you're going by the quickest route. North, west, I'll get there eventually. He'd thrown his backpack at his feet and now accidentally kicked it. The top flopped open. He bent down to fasten the snaps. The contents of a man's bag are for him alone. He wiggled his toes, wished to take off his boots, but he didn't want to get that comfortable, and surely the driver wouldn't want that either. You're traveling pretty light there. Just the backpack? The hitchhiker nodded, then realized the driver wouldn't see that. Yep, I don't have too much stuff, and I don't need too much stuff. The hitchhiker ran his tongue over his lips, tasted of grit. He wiped the back of his hand over top. He could use a drink. Where do you want dropping off then? How far are you going? Not sure entirely. Earlier I was feeling a bit sleepy, but I opened the windows fully, turned up the music, and took care of that. Now I feel like I could drive forever and a day. The hitchhiker appreciated the feeling of being wide awake, blood coursing through the veins, hearing every little sound as if it was right beside his head. He repositioned his legs, glanced down at his bag, and secured it between his feet. He was glad there wasn't any music playing. He disliked the kinds of music most everyone else played. Mind if I open the window? All your talk has made me keen for a cool breeze. That's not true. There's a metallic smell in the Cadillac, sort of like the smell of brakes or the clutch wearing down. But that's not it. The smell isn't a burning smell. Still, it's been there the whole time, and the hitchhiker didn't want to smell it anymore. He opened the window halfway. Sure, no problem. Not too far though, cold out now, and the heat's not working. The hitchhiker wound it back up until it was open about an inch. Air funneled in loudly. The hitchhiker raised his hand to feel it going through his fingers. Earlier, when he'd been waiting for this ride, he'd taken off his leather jacket, slung it over his shoulder as he walked. He tugged it back on again when the Cadillac stopped. Now, though, He was cold. He pulled the zipper as high as it would go. Too tight. He dropped it slightly and closed the window. He curled his fingers onto his lap, tapped the tips together. The silence was thick, like mud in a dwindling river. But the hitchhiker had nothing to say. Just then, the driver snapped open the glove box. It thumped down. The hitchhiker swore under his breath. "Hey, give a guy a heads up!" As he pressed into the seat to avoid the driver's arm, the hitchhiker glimpsed inside the compartment. It was all shadows, but something inside glinted. God damn it if that wasn't a gun. He bent forward and squinted hard, but the driver's hand was in the way. When the driver was done rooting around, all the hitchhiker could see were papers. He couldn't think of a reason to open the glove box to check it out, so he just sat there, thinking of the gun. "Sorry, wanted to grab some gum. Got a real dry mouth all of a sudden." The driver unwrapped the stick and popped it into his mouth and threw the wrapper in the back, the big, black, cavernous back. The metallic smell had returned. The hitchhiker thought to say something, but didn't. He didn't want to know what the smell was. He cracked the window again, not caring about the cold. The driver's gum chewing was as loud as the airstream. The hitchhiker blocked out the smacking as best he could. The driver's hands were tight on the wheel. The hitchhiker noticed the chunky silver ring, a signature ring, the kind a student buys to show off long after graduation, or to remind them of their glory years. It gleamed in a garish sort of way. "Pretty nice, huh? Got it at a pawn shop." The driver's voice held such glee. Quiet, then smack, smack. The hitchhiker kept his eyes out the window, inhaling the air, watching the scenery pass. The moon had come out, casting a weak light. There wasn't much to see, though. The earlier barns and buildings had given way to dense forest that crept quite close to the road at times, almost as if he could touch the branches. "I know of a cabin up ahead. I was thinking of stopping for a break before I push on. Driving's getting to me. Okay by you?" The hitchhiker stiffened. He didn't know of any cabin along this road. The driver stuffed the chewed gum into a napkin he'd retrieved from the back and dropped it into the air pocket. He whistled a short song. The hitchhiker rolled up the window, gripping the knob. "That your cabin, then?" "Nope. Belongs to a friend. He leaves the key, just in case." Of course, thought the hitchhiker, a place to drop in to do whatever. What if I say it's not okay by me? There wouldn't be much choice in the matter. The hitchhiker was going wherever the driver was going, but he wanted to test it out anyway. "I'd stop. Still, gotta use the restroom." The hitchhiker ran through a few scenarios in his head, talking himself out of his disquiet. Could be the truth. The hitchhiker glanced at the driver. But if not, the hitchhiker could hold his own against the older, frumpy man. Minus the gun, that was. He thrust his knee against the glove box. "It's okay by me." Soon the driver signaled and turned right into the woods. The dirt track was narrow. Chutes grazed doors, giving sound to the strain in the Cadillac. The driver rode the brakes. There was no cabin that the hitchhiker could see. In fact, it looked like the path was petering out. The hitchhiker's every nerve ending buzzed. Just then, the brush opened up and a tiny building materialized. So, the cabin was real. Good. The hitchhiker slouched back into his seat, relaxed his hands that had turned to fists in his lap. When the car stopped, the driver turned off the ignition and exited. Instead of going to the cabin, however, he went behind the car and rummaged in the trunk. The hitchhiker wound down the window and turned the side mirror inward, trying to eyeball the driver. The trunk lid was a dark wall. The hitchhiker stretched his arm down to the glove box and pressed the button, keeping his eye on the upraised lid. He put up his knee to gently let it down. He leaned forward and stuck in his hand. He almost expected a nibble on his fingers. He felt all around, slowly and carefully so he didn't dislodge anything. There were only papers. He closed it with his knee. The driver put down the trunk. It was time. The hitchhiker reached for his bag, opened it fully, and seized the chef's knife. He'd never felt more alive. He gulped in air and reached for the door handle. In an open window, a pistol was pointed at his forehead.
Thank you, Elle. Now, please welcome Jess Chase.
My name is Jess, and I kissed a racist. Unknowingly, of course, but this is the reality of dating in a small town. I have often said that Prince Edward County is the southern point in the Bermuda Triangle for eligible, tolerable men. The other 2 points being Trenton and Belleville. Though Napanee, where this particular piece of human refuse was based, could easily make it the Bermuda Quadrilateral. It started off well enough. A man who was located relatively close to me, with an unassuming dating profile, asked me to go for a drink. He was tall, good-looking, and employed. And his replies were coherent and prompt. He was a blue-collar worker with intelligently worded messages, which seemed like a winning combination. He even offered to drive to me in his own vehicle. Imagine. I know, the bar is shockingly low, but it was winter and I was ready for someone else to put in the effort for once. We met at a local bar. He was taller and more handsome in person. That never happens. We chatted easily over gin and tonics. He was rougher in his manner than I expected, but not unkind. It quickly became apparent that we were very different people. He was openly anti-establishment, and I am, by and large, a rule follower. But still, the conversation flowed. I knew another date wasn't in the cards, but after moving to a second bar and him briefly resting a hand on my leg, I thought, hey, maybe that's not the point. The date came to a close, and I drove him back to his car. We made out a little, which was fine, but I had become certain his personality wasn't for me. While he hadn't said anything explicitly wrong over the course of the night, the vibe was off. He was off. He had told me his last name when we discussed a mutual love of genealogy. Honestly, this overly keen interest in his ancestral line should have been my first clue. Within 10 minutes of arriving home, I used this information to find him on social media. His open Facebook profile told me everything I needed to know and then some. Vitriolic post after vitriolic post. Hateful rhetoric directed at every group of people you can imagine. This guy, he really couldn't pick a lane, honestly. As a straight white man, he identified himself firmly as a victim. And I had just had his tongue in my mouth. It was enough to make me gag. Sadly, this isn't the first piece of human garbage that I have been on a date with, and sadly, it might not be the last. Online dating is a minefield at the best of times, and combine that with a small, rural dating pool, and the odds you'll end up entertaining a dud only increase. There is a reason why the longest relationship I've ever been in is with the owl from Duolingo. Duo and I just hit 419 days, so you could say things are getting pretty serious. But hey, onward and upward, right? I'm still in the game and really hoping that next time I'm not stuck taking out the trash.
Thank you, Jess. Now, please help me welcome Kathryn Kuitenbrouwer.
Thank you, Kathryn. Is that mic okay, friend?
Yeah, I just don't know if I'm supposed to preface it or not.
Be yourself.
Yeah. I started a new novel in 2023, and this is an excerpt from it, and just to contain it a little bit, it turns out that I've written a gay gothic novel set in Consicon. You know the world's waiting for it. A candy pink Cadillac cruising through the hamlet gleamed and spoke some new language. People who saw it, and there were a good handful, turned toward it as if it was a first spring tulip. Where was it going and why? It did a circuit and then another, the same route as the Christmas parade had months ago, but in the opposite direction. From the old fire hall to the Legion and around back to the fire hall, behind which, under a tarp, the floats were stored. The older folks, following it with their eyes until it turned, tried not to acknowledge the roiling inside of them of forgotten desires, clabbering toward jealousy. Some of the children gave chase even as their parents scolded. And then along its second rotation, when the car signaled and pulled into Mora's driveway, those same children stood all gangly to see who would emerge. Of course it would be Mora's guest, the audacity of that woman, they would recall one of the mothers muttering later. The occupants took their time. The passenger emerged first. He swung the door open and unfolded himself, his linen trousers creased, a pallid and lengthy fellow, his tawny hair unruly. He was bearded. He smiled at them and gently waved his hand. The children did not move. They stood in a paralytic tableau, arrested in their anticipation, wide-eyed, motley. And then the driver's door opened, and there he was, a shining example, a rare sort, pampered and tan, golden-maned, immaculate even after the long drive from the city. This man reminded them of men they'd seen on soap operas, of TV men who betrayed and apologized and went ahead and betrayed again. Men who gruffly maneuvered around their women, men who knew their minds but whose lives were brought to disarray through love and aspiration. And now they knew that these men drove outlandish Cadillacs, and they knew they wanted to be just so when they grew up. It was Craig's mother's Mary Kay car, a brand new 1985 Coupe de Ville that she had won by dint of years of hard work in the pyramid scheme of rouge and mascara and selling up. Craig borrowed it as often as she would let him, and with no shame, the pink a wonderful tone of fabulous. Brady was outside by now on the front porch, squinting out just as the stranger stood smiling beside the car. The one bearded, dark, with impossibly lively eyes, and then the driver, like a god or a king. What if you could love and stay in love? Out of the blue, Brady wondered this. The passenger came closer, rubbing his face, and asked Brady in accented English who had made these sculptures. Brady said, "What sculptures?" The man looked at him queerly in a way that made Brady feel underestimated. The other man ran a finger along a stretch of corroded bandsaw that worked as a sort of parapet on one of the fathomless things that his mother had made. The teeth were at the man's chest level or so, but the rest of the thing itself rose almost as high as the house in a vertical way that suggested a horizon laid out at the wrong angle. The whole thing was the pink of Brady's own gums and harmonized with the car a shade deeper, 10% more cobalt blue if Mora were consulted. It was unsightly, Homer, the local convenience store owner, had said recently passing by. There ought to be a bylaw, he had added. This, said the man, this is a glorious thing. My mum made it, said Brady, suddenly made proud. Your mum? Is she here? And Brady was about to say of course when she appeared from the backyard, pushing aside a bloom-dead lilac. It had been a raucous tea party, that shrub, not a week previously. The whole hamlet was like an emporium in May. What is it? Mora said. Who the hell are you? Is this for sale? The bearded man said, then gesturing to the pink thing. And the laugh that burbled out of her was one Brady had not ever heard. It came up from her feet. No, it came up from the middle of the planet. Something light and wild raced through him. What's so funny, the man said. And then, when she did not stop, he added, my name is Henrik, and this is Craig. He put his open palm on the chest of the Adonis. We know about art, and I have cash. I don't know a thing about art, Craig smiled. It's all you, baby. And that really set her off. Brady had not known she could laugh like this. It was incandescent. It woke up every nerve in him. She brought Henrik and Craig to the porch and sat them down in the wicker chairs and told Brady to bring them iced tea, which he did do from out of the fridge. And while they drank it, Henrik, he had put on a straw hat, he had elegant cheekbones, he had never worked with his body even one day of his life, explained that he was an art dealer, a gallerist, he called himself, from Toronto, and that he would like to sell her sculpture to one of his corporate clients, and did she have more? Craig sat quietly, sunk into the chair, a beautiful sight with the iced tea, that special shade of amber, and the ice clinking, and the light caressing his face. Are there more? No. Brady cut in and said how she had a lot more. It was all she did. Are they for sale? Yes, said Brady, before she had a chance to respond. Henrik pulled a wallet out and handed her $300 in 20s and told her he would be back to dismantle the sculpture and ask what it was called. It's called Pink to the Clouds, which she had just made up on the spot. I like it, said Craig. Is $300 enough, though? Brady said no. And Mora put her palm very gently on his knee and said, it's plenty. Or maybe pink number 1, said Henrik. And she said, okay, sure. After that, she let them look around the backyard, and Henrik didn't stop nodding and mentioning people that they had never heard of. It was the day that Brady came to know to call the things she made art, a category of things that were fathomless, nonsensical, and that made a young mind float. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn. All right, now please help me to welcome Helen Humphreys.
I'm just going to read a couple little pieces from, this is Followed by the Lark. It's a novel about Henry David Thoreau, and it's written in little pieces that are kind of resemble a journal entries, but even though they're third person. So this one is about when Henry goes to Fire Island to look for the body of Margaret Fuller, who was in a shipwreck just off Fire Island there. It stormed so hard the rain came down the chimneys and put their fires out. That's what the locals told him when he came looking for the body of his friend. The storm was so powerful it reached right into their houses. There was nothing they could do to help those on the Elizabeth as the ship broke open 100 feet from shore. They could do nothing to help, so they helped themselves to the trunks that rolled up onto the sand, taking jewelry and sewing silk, ball gowns and boots. The bodies they left untouched, each one naked because the rough sea had torn the clothes from the passengers when they were swept overboard. He saw piles of almonds and juniper berries on the beach. He saw a man with 6 stolen hats on his head and bars of soap turned by the waves into cylinders. He found pages from an anatomy text scattered a mile from the wreck, and single gloves packed so tightly with sand they looked like severed hands. He didn't find his friend or the metal box with her writing, but her dead child was recovered, so cold and stiff from the sea that the baby waited a whole day to bleed from his wounds. Afterwards, when Henry wrote up an account of his search for Margaret Fuller, for Emerson and the other transcendentalists, some said he was heartless to record so many details, to ask the thieves for their version of that night. Why was he talking about soap? Where was the feeling for his missing friend? But a detail was never impersonal, whether remembered or recorded. Paying attention was a kind of devotion, and he didn't need to write the words love or grief to prove his tenderness. For it was love who strolled along the beach wearing 6 beribboned hats upon its head. It was grief that plunged you into a roiling sea, churned you in the waves until your very shape was changed. It was grief that came down inside your house so hard some nights that all your fires went out. And then I'm just going to read one other little bit. This is for the month that we are in, November. He found the buttercup on Bear Garden Hill, a pip of brightness in dull-colored November. Henry knelt down beside it to better appreciate the oddity and miracle of a spring flower still holding onto its patch of hillside in late autumn. Sometimes there was a return to spring in October, with a string of warm days and the second bloom on a rose, with the sun still celebrated within the head of a sunflower or hawkweed. But a spring flower in the last week of November, a breath away from winter, was another thing entirely. Henry collected plants for the herbarium he was making with his sister, and he was tempted to pluck the November buttercup and bring it to show her, to press it carefully and preserve it for posterity. But the bravery the little flower had displayed by growing so far out of season was perhaps better appreciated by leaving it be. So Henry unfolded himself to standing height, tipped his hat to the splendor of the buttercup, and moved on. Thank you.